It is about to be the 250th anniversary of the United States as its own democratic nation. And there are a lot of flaws, a lot of things to be fixed. We're at a pivotal moment. But one of the things that I want to celebrate especially is the fact that this country has been characterized by people with open minds who wander what I call outside the building. That is, innovators and entrepreneurs who don't take established structures for granted and feel they can change them. That's America, a land of innovators and entrepreneurs. And that has always been a source of greatness to be applauded, because for whatever problems there are people emerging to fix them. So my home city of Boston was there fighting the Revolutionary War, and it has always been on the verge of revolution. It's now a leader in science and technology, biomedical research, something that's part of the open minds who bring us new inventions. It also has been the home of many social entrepreneurs whose mission is to make things better. So organizations like City Year, or Citizen Schools, or Beacon Academy, organizations dedicated to finding an innovative way to tackle issues in education, for example, that have not been solved. It's this local action in which people with the entrepreneurial spirit open their minds to new ways of doing things. That's a source of inspiration to be celebrated. And other cities like Seattle and San Jose, California, are among the greenest cities in America, if not the world. They are also the home of innovators, of tech companies that started and have that spirit of adventure, spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship. And that's what I think we should be celebrating in America. Science and truth and innovation, opening minds to doing something differently outside the building. Well, outside the building, Think Outside the Building happens to be the title of my latest book. I wrote it in part because I have been going to too many dinner parties accompanied by what I call fine wines. That is not a typo. I really mean the complaining cry and not the Chardonnay. People's conversations were about what was wrong, and isn't it terrible, and decrying that. Well, I will admit there's a lot to whine about, and we should have some space for whining, but negativity sucks us in and therefore dampens the entrepreneurial spirit of innovation. Negativity is all about what we can't do. And I agree, there's a lot to whine about, but negatives are powerful. There is research that shows it takes 5 positives to make up for 1 negative. So positives, action, innovation, you have to try a lot harder. There are also studies that show that people who are negative or critical are often regarded as smarter than the people who are positive and action-oriented. Isn't that striking? The critics seem to know something we don't do and they're smarter. Negativity, however, feeds on itself and in self-fulfilling cycles of decline. So you begin with negativity and it leads other people to be negative too. And it spirals downward. I studied winning streaks and losing streaks in sports for one of my books called Confidence. And it was clear that in losing streaks, people would figure out what was wrong and then blame somebody else other than themselves, which then led other people to blame the first parties, and it just spiraled downward. And in losing streaks, people go passive. They feel it's all too big, we couldn't possibly do anything about it, and so they do nothing. So I want to replace the lure of negativity with the optimism of activism. When you do something, you feel better. Even if it's a small thing, if it's reaching out to somebody, if it's joining a social movement or a protest, if it's thinking about starting a company, if it's thinking about something you might learn. Optimism comes from action. And it turns out also that optimists are not in denial of all those negative things we could whine about. There are other research showing that optimists are much more likely to look at the facts than pessimists, because optimists believe they can do something about them. So optimists derive from action, and it's important to get moving. Any action is better than none. And in our current environment, when national is ugly, local is beautiful. And it's often been the local that has elevated us, that has been the source of entrepreneurs start somewhere, and they're either supported by their community or they're not. Innovators need to be surrounded by others, by the tools, and that all can happen locally. So rather than get discouraged about how negative the world seems, it's important to be stimulating local action, even now more than ever. And I look around the country for inspiring stories of the doers who are making things happen. And by the way, people who face the facts of how bad it is and then start doing something about it often feel less depressed. It's amazing to me. Sometimes the people solving the most difficult problems, tackling the most horrendous situations, feel better than those who aren't because of the ways in which they're contributing. So I've been collecting case studies, stories of very inspiring aspects of local action. One of my favorite is an organization, a coalition in Chicago called West Side United. West Side United is dedicated to closing the longevity gap on the west side of Chicago for over 500,000 people. West Side United started as an idea from a physician at one of the local hospitals, big hospital system, that maybe Chicago, which had huge gaps between the less affluent neighborhoods on the west side and the more affluent neighborhoods, other parts of Chicago, he wanted to close the gap and make his patients healthier by also investing in economic development. And so this was not the head of the hospital, the biggest hospital system on the west side. As I said, 500,000 people or more being served. He went to his boss and he said he had this idea that they could start something like the Harlem Children's Zone on the west side. The Harlem Children's Zone is in Harlem, New York, and it's 10 square blocks approximately, in which there's an investment in children from before birth all the way through college and career. And that was the model for President Obama's Promised Neighborhoods. Another social entrepreneur who made that happen, Jeffrey Canada. So Dr. Ansel went to his boss in his hospital in Chicago and said, let's do a Harlem Children's Zone for 10 square blocks around the hospital. And his boss said, no. He said, let's not do 10 square blocks, let's do 10 neighborhoods. And that's why they ended up aspiring bigger to take on 10 neighborhoods. They eventually built a coalition of 6 large hospital systems. Hospitals can be a great source of social entrepreneurship if we harness them correctly, along with the community. Well, as many people know, there's no such thing as the community. Those communities consist of dozens, hundreds of separate organizations, separate groups, separate ethnicities, but they pulled them together, developed a governance structure with equal power, the community, the hospitals. And when they started getting funding for business development, because people in those neighborhoods said, we like the idea of job creation, but even better, we like the idea of creating our own jobs through entrepreneurship. So small business became a really important emphasis, and they had funding, and the community, along with the governance structure of the hospitals, decided together who got the grants. And when COVID struck, they became the racial rapid response team for the entire city of Chicago, because they were organized, because they got things done. That's what de Tocqueville said about America. He said, America, every community is full of people who are ready to organize and mobilize and bring people together. That's the greatness of the country. So West Side United is only one example of many where local is definitely beautiful and the place to get started, and you just get started. In Seattle, for example, one of the greenest cities in America and high on the list of the world, in Seattle, it's those entrepreneurs who are pushing other entities to be even greener. Believe it or not, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who gets a lot of criticism because of Amazon's profile with respect to the environment, it was Jeff Bezos who pushed the plans for a new arena to be not just carbon neutral, but carbon zero. And Amazon bought the naming rights for the new arena for hockey, basketball. The first time the city had had winter sports for a long time. Women's NBA is also in that arena. And Bezos pushed them and gave the naming rights to the arena. It's now called the Climate Pledge Arena. And they have become an educator of people in the community and tourists who come to see the green wall, the tunnels underneath, a historic roof, and essentially, not quite, zero carbon. So local can be very beautiful. It can be our models, our inspiration for the world. And I'm often asked, like all Harvard professors get asked, as though we know everything to predict the future, because I talked about 250 years of history. We're at a turning point right now, whether we preserve the open minds, the science, the willingness to experiment, the innovation or not. And, you know, it's very hard to know what's going to happen, but only we control what the future is. This was a recent Chinese fortune cookie I got, and this is for real. I mean, there's the actual fortune. It said, you know, that you'll send ripples of positivity far and wide. Well, that's my mission in life now, is to overcome those negatives, understand the problems, but overcome them through activism, through action, and make something else happen. Well, this is the only way I know of ensuring a brighter future. And so I want to end by quoting some famous Americans through history about the issue of predicting the future. So first is Yogi Berra, one of our great American philosophers, who was one of the people who said, forecasting or predicting the future is a very difficult occupation, especially about the future. You know, when we predict, including today, when we're making predictions about the future of this, the future of that, technology, democracy, we're extrapolating from the past. We're not necessarily predicting the future. We're assuming that wherever we are today will continue as it is. And I say that doesn't have to be true. And so I want to quote another famous American, Abraham Lincoln. I tracked down this quote because it's been said by a lot of people, including Silicon Valley people. But Abraham Lincoln said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So we have to think about the future we want and then think about creating it. And finally, I want to quote another distinguished American, Harriet Tubman, founder of the Underground Railroad, who said, "Just keep going. Just keep going. Never give up." And then together, through action, locally, wherever you are, we can create a brighter future together. Thank you.